My name is Gareth Fowler. I'm the Managing Director of KeySafe. As we're quite a small group, I thought it might be a good idea to have a bit of fun and show you a few fake passports and hand a few things out. The only thing I can't give you is things to take away with you for obvious reasons, so the documents do need to come back to me if possible. The first thing I'd just like to hand out for you to have a look at, make your mind up, and we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation. I'm going to use David as my glamorous assistant.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
Glamour away.
Almost 1 million illegal immigrants were living in the UK during 2013, and 14,062 enforced removals took place by the UK Border Protection Agency during the same year. That's all the statistics I'm going to give you before any of you think you may have stumbled into David's aforementioned UKIP conference. I won't give you any more numbers. Although the topic of immigration obviously is now a hot one, a lot of you are having to think about processes that you may not have thought of before. You're having to come across things that you haven't encountered. To me and my staff and the company which I work for, we're in all too familiar territory. Any of you who have had the misfortune of sitting through one of my presentations before will know that KeySafe have been evaluating a prospective tenant's ability to live and work in the UK for approximately 15 years. And if you've ever attended one of those presentations or you've been present at any ALA regional meetings, for instance, you'll know we talked about high-profile people who didn't have the right documents to stay in the country and were almost asked to leave overnight. And the point I was trying to get across at that time, and the point I was trying to make, was that regardless of who these people are, their stature, they still need to be checked. The documents need to be evaluated. And we talked about, and I'm sure you can remember these, they are a few years old now. The Attorney General hired an illegal worker. And there are actually, I think, 6 Australian rugby league players, professional sports people, who were removed from the country overnight. David's given me free rein to keep you all awake, so if I could just see a show of hands, everybody who uses currently a third-party referencing agency. Most of the room. Referencing companies are now mobilising themselves into 2 camps. A lot of them have woken up, and there are now those who are seeing a commercial advantage in offering an immigration check as part of their service. There hasn't been many before. At one point, I know we were the only company who were offering these checks. And now, obviously, with the change in I was going to call it the pilot area, phased introduction, we are seeing those who are now starting to offer the checks. But there are still a lot who are distancing themselves from the new legislation and are placing the onus firmly on the agent or the landlord. Don't forget, there are still a considerable number of referencing companies who don't even get simple things like proof of address on behalf of the agents. Actually asking them to go that extra mile and check immigration status, check documents, passports, visas, etc. I'm not sure that's going to happen in most respects. Those referencing companies who are firmly in the second camp are usually relying on 2 factors. David's touched on this already. The responsibility for compliance cannot be transferred to a third party, outside, obviously, of you guys as a letting agent. They are correct, and again, as we've already seen, this is detailed in the Code of Practice. So it can be transferred from the landlord to the agent when they've entered into a written agreement. The second thing that those in the second camp are relying on is that the original document must be seen. And again, they are correct. The Code of Practice points to the fact that you must obtain original acceptable documents. David touched on the second point, which is bizarre, and talks about a live video link if you can't be in the presence of the holder. I'm not sure many will be going down that route. The strange thing about that is you must still have the genuine document in front of you when you've got the person on a live video link. So if the person isn't in the country, which this is implying to actually be there in front of you, will you have the original document? I doubt it. I will come back to point 2 shortly, but firstly, let's take a look at point 1. As a referencing company, we're not seeking to take on the liability. We're concerned with protecting it. protecting your interests as an agent, as the majority of you will no doubt be taking on this liability on behalf of your landlords, whether it's in your managed service or maybe in other services that you offer. I mentioned earlier previous ALA presentations that I carried out, and in that presentation I talk about this phrase, a key risk management tool. I can't stress strongly enough how the checking of immigration status complements and fits into that risk management process. Employing the services of a referencing company who does not see this as part of their offering, to me, and I am biased, I do accept that, but it makes no sense. What I want to do now is just give you 3 examples of why I think that if the two are separate, they'd be so disjointed. And while I'm talking through them, just think about the fact that if you're actually checking the documents yourself and then you've got a referencing company do everything else, how disjointed this may become. So let's talk first about visa start dates. During our referencing process, one of the things we look at when we get an applicant's visa is the start date on the visa. Now that may sound very simple to you, but what we're looking at is how that corresponds to the address history on their application form that they've submitted. We get a lot of application forms where the applicant is trying to convince us that they've been in the country a matter of days. The start date on their visa was 18 months ago. Straight away, we're asking questions of the applicant. Where have you been in the past 18 months when your visa started? All of a sudden, a can of worms is opened. Oh yes, we have been in the UK 18 months. Here's the 2 properties that we rented. Here's where we lived. We need to credit check those addresses. We need to take landlord references for those addresses. If we weren't doing this as part of the referencing process, that might not get done. Employment permission. I'm sure most of you are aware, and again, David's touched on this, a lot of visas that you will see will be subject to restrictions on employment. It might say doctors in training, no sports people, etc. It's crucial that when we're taking the employment references as a referencing company, that we're allowed to match the two together. From a risk point of view, it's essential that the person has the right visa in order to carry out the employment, as they may be asked to stop that employment the week later, a month later, thus putting your landlord in a position where he's got a tenant who actually isn't working. And the third example I've used, and there are many others, is full names on passports. It can be a minefield. The name that you think you're checking on a tenancy application form, even on a proof of address sometimes, like a utility bill, might not actually bear any resemblance to that person's name on the passport. It's essential that as a credit referencing or a tenant referencing company that we're checking all names, all aliases, full names, in order to give you as an agent and your landlord the fullest picture. Let's come to point 2 and the need for the original document to be seen, together with the prospective tenant being present. We recommend to all our agents that they obtain the original documents. That's not what we're saying. And you'll see the code of practice says the very same thing. We're not pretending that we can offer a service which totally replaces your duty as an agent and your duty under the Act. It's a 2-tiered process. And at this point, I'd just like to call on the services of David again and just hand round a document that we've produced for the benefit of our agents. And I'm sure some of you might find those useful, or certainly it does cover points in one document that David covered earlier, and it's primarily just a checklist for you guys to use. So as I said, we're not pretending that what we do replaces your duty as an agent to see the original documents, to check the original documents. What we're providing is not only a service that will complement the rest of the referencing service, but a full authentication and verification service of the applicable documents, which, as we've seen from David, in most cases will be a passport, an ID card, or a visa. What I'm saying is you spot the obvious and let us do the rest. Student visas. How many do you know the rules regarding student visas? EA dependent visas, where the actual person with the visa isn't an EA national. Tier 5 visas, it is a bit of a minefield is what I'm trying to say. We can, as a referencing company, in some respects, take that minefield away from you and give you some comfort that we know what we're doing, we know how to assess the documents, we know what the pitfalls are, etc. As I said right at the start, we have been doing this for 15 years. I came across an interesting paper recently. David talks about reading interesting documents. I don't, as David said, advise that you actually go and seek this document out and read it. It's basically a Home Office paper, but I just thought there was a couple of sentences which were interesting. It's talking about the use of scanners, which is the online scanner, which I'll show you that we use in a second. And just a couple of interesting points. Scanners are very effective when compared to a basic visual inspection by a person with no or limited training in examining documents. This is especially useful in frontline functions where documents are produced to assert identity, and this is the interesting bit, to staff who are not trained to a high level to recognise fraudulent documents. Sound familiar? The use of scanner technology by public and private sector organisations should be encouraged. And that's a Home Office paper. In essence, if you are utilising a third-party referencing company in any event, why not insist on this as an additional service? So let's go back to the code of practice and see what emphasis is being put on you as an agent. Sorry, I do need to go back a slide. Okay. This is the emphasis. Landlords, and obviously if it's been transferred, agents must check. Photographs and dates of birth are consistent across documents and with the person's appearance in order to detect impersonation. Expiry dates have not passed. The documents appear genuine and show no signs of being tampered with. We've just come out of the busiest time of year for all you guys. August, September, every year, crazy. We see it as crazy as a referencing company. I know you guys do as an agent. Are you confident that you have the time, skill and knowledge to know when a document is authentic and not been tampered with? David touched on this, and there is a little bit in the code of practice, and I am paraphrasing. It basically says you're not expected to be experts. I've been working in the last couple of months with an immigration consultant. It's a gentleman who used to work for the Home Office, and most of his experience was involved in right-to-work legislation. And David will tell you this, and if any of you have been involved with right-to-work legislation, you'll know that they basically transplanted a lot of that into this. So there was a lot of similarities between right-to-work and right-to-rent. In his experience with the Home Office and afterwards as a consultant, he said that you will be expected to look at the obvious, but the obvious necessarily isn't obvious, if that makes sense. At this point, I'd like to just hand around my French ID card. I'm not French, by the way, and I've got David there, just for you to have a look at. The point of that document is that it's not necessarily very good, but is it bad enough to be obvious that you guys need to spot that? And will you be liable for not spotting it? Or is it good enough to fool somebody? As he gets all these slides out of sync. An individual's ability to purchase forged documents on the internet has never been greater. You only need to have a 10-minute scan around to see what's on offer, and that there are sites offering fake documents. I came across this review, which was interesting. Somebody bragging and just wanting to let everybody know that he'd been able to obtain a Lithuanian passport from a website and how easy it was, and how he'd been able to use it to fool a few different individuals or organisations. Again, I'll just call on David and hand around those two, which are fake passports, just for you to look at. If you look at the document on the top, that's actually the document as it would have appeared. The document below it is how it looks under UV light. And then on the back, it actually describes to you and shows you why those are fake passports. You might say, well, so what if the documents are fake? And I go back to the earlier, we can't expect it to be experts. We've carried out our obligations. There is a huge elephant in the room here, and I'm going to come back to this word here, risk. Because there is a reason why as a company we've always carried out these checks, and it comes down to that word, risk. The risk to your landlord that his rent will not be paid. The risk to your landlord that his property will be damaged. The risk to your landlord that those people going into the property will be carrying out criminal activity. I don't want to make light of the fines that David's explained to you, but they could actually pale into insignificance when you talk about loss of rent, damage to property, etc. We're here in London. 1 month's rent is more than the fine. If you get somebody in your property who's give you fake or fraud documents, they've done so for a reason. They won't make model tenants. They've given you those fake or fraudulent documents because they don't intend to pay the rent, or they intend to sublet, or they intend to carry out criminal activity. We all know what that criminal activity may be, and as I said, it may make the fines in some ways pale into insignificance. Come back to that one. If, as David says, we do have a change of government next year, it won't make a difference to us as a company. As I say, we believe this is best practice. We believe as agents you should be offering this service to your landlords, and we will keep providing this service to the private rented sector, because ultimately it provides protection to not only your reputation but also your landlord. What I'd like to do next, just to wrap up, is just very briefly to take you through the process that we go through and show you what we do as a referencing company. So very shortly from in time for December the 1st, we've revamped the reports that we provide. Any of you who are on KeySafe's emailing list will have already seen these reports, and I excuse the bad quality, although they look better on that screen than they did a couple of weeks ago when I showed them. You'll see the usual things, although you may not be used to seeing some of these things from your referencing company. Credit check, money laundering check, so proof of identity, again, part of the process, fits very nicely into what we're doing. Bank account check, verifies the applicant's bank account. Here's the right to rent sections. Copy of the passport, looks blurred because it's a real passport, so we're trying to blur out the details. All the data taken from the document. Talks about the data, the name, date of birth, nationality, etc., document number. If applicable, the visa and the biometrics. That's only got one side, it will show two sides. And again, all the data taken out of the document. Does the applicant have the right to rent based on what the document is, the expiry date, nationality, etc.? Most importantly, how authentic is the document? And that's just a close-up of the right to rent section of the report. Quite a comprehensive report. We've partnered with a company called ID Checker. That's who we're using to actually authenticate and verify the documents that we will produce. ID Checker are at the forefront of document checking. They work for temp agencies like Randstad, USG, compliance and money transfer companies, MoneyGram, TravelX. A lot of high-profile names that you will have heard of, and each document will go through, and this is the science bit for you, logical data checks, forensic document tampering checks, file metadata extraction. Don't ask me, please. Very suited to what we call a customer not present environment. Something that you may be used to hearing when you pay by credit card, pay by debit card. It was only a short time ago that we were being told we couldn't actually use our credit cards and debit cards when we weren't present in front of the merchant. Technology has moved on and continues to move on. And as I say, this solution sits very well in complement with what you guys are going to be doing with getting the original document in a customer not present environment. All agents or all applicants will be able to upload their documents, smartphone, scanner, camera, tablet. Very easy, very user-friendly. As standard, we will also have access and put every document through what's called the Amber Hill database. I don't know if any of you are aware of what the Amber Hill database is. It's basically run by the Metropolitan Police, and it's part of their strategy to tackle identity crime. They hold approximately 81,000 records, counterfeit, forged passports, identity cards, etc. We check as standard with that database to make sure that we're not dealing with any compromised documents, and that is part of our standard check. As David has rightly stated, there will be times when an applicant comes to you who hasn't got any documents but has got an appeal or has got documents that are outstanding with the Home Office. Obviously there's nothing to check, and that's when you will be able to use, or your landlord, and there was still a little bit of confusion over this, I believe, whether the landlord will be able to use the landlord checking service or you as agents will be. But obviously where that's going to be apparent, we won't be able to check documents. What we will accept is is the landlord checking service confirmation. So if there's an applicant who's got that if there's a landlord who's got that confirmation on behalf of an applicant, will send it us. We're happy to include it as part of the referencing process and include in the right to rent. Just a couple of future developments, and again linked into what David was saying. There is no process or easy process with follow-up checks. It's not 12 months necessarily for everybody. That's the shortest it can be. What we intend to build into our referencing service for our clients is an alert system. We take all the data, as I've already showed you, and extract it from the visas. So we will know when that visa is due to expire. We will know what that time limit is, and we will offer an alert system to our agents telling them that they need to recheck the applicant and hopefully re-reference them at the same time.